are missing somebody that they really should have. Okay, so they're setting it up. When they set it up, we'll be going ahead.
Their loss.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I don't know quite what to do. I think it's
I think it's all
live
set.
streaming.
It says
So is
live
it
on Facebook.
live on Facebook? Okay, so I think we're live on Facebook, and so welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, produced by Richard Wicca at the Think Twice Radio, the home of the future. And I'm Vicki Ross, Executive Director at the Western New York Peace Center, and your host for this evening. And today, or for this session, our special guests are Dr. Rolanda Ward. Hi, Rolanda.
Hi, how are you, Vicki?
Good, good. It's great to see you. Rolanda is the director of the Rose Bente Lee Ostapenko Center for Race, Equity, and Mission at Niagara University, as well as being a social work professor there. So, and an ex-classmate, I want to say, at Boston University.
Hey, and today we got 3 alums, all 3 of us.
Yes, all 3 of us. Yes, yes, yes. And Melissa Costa. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. Now, it's hard to catch up with you, but I know you've done so much great work, including presenting in all kinds of places. I've heard you present before. It's great to see you. Thanks for all your social work of all kinds. Been working with kids and families, mostly.
Yes.
Where in Boston, isn't it?
So I'm actually about an hour south of Boston, but I am in Massachusetts. I work for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Mental Health.
Right, that's right.
So I am the kids case manager supervisor.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a lot. And I know you've done some wonderful work, some very exciting work. And talking about children and youth is really an important piece of our work. Oh, okay. You haven't turned us on. Oh, okay. I thought I did. I turned us on.
That sets the timer on.
Oh.
I'm gonna actually start your recording.
Okay, so Facebook people, that's what we're starting over again. People don't know the technological challenges we've overcome to get this far tonight. So I just want to say we'll just keep right on rolling. So this is life in the COVID, right? And this is just real life, right?
Now, put that on. You were on here.
Okay, so
take 2.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, produced at Think Twice Radio, the home of the future, by Richard Wicca. Thank you, Richard. I am your host, Victoria Ross, Vicki Ross. I'm the director at the Western New York Peace Center, and we have 2 very special guests today, both social workers, both actually alums of Boston University, as am I. And so Dr. Rolanda Ward, welcome, Rolanda.
Thank you, Vicki.
Okay,
welcome, Melissa.
Thank
and
you.
welcome, Melissa. Thank you, Melissa. And for those of you on Facebook, Facebook Live, you might, which we're also doing a Facebook Live of this, you would have heard us introduce ourselves before, but I still want to say that that Melissa is working very hard with children and youth at Massachusetts Department of Mental Health as case supervisor. Case manager, supervisor, right. And of course, Rolanda, I've introduced you on this show before, and we're very proud to work with Niagara University, with the social work department there, even to have one of your interns, and especially always to work with the Rose Bente Lee Ostapenko Center for Race Mission, for Race, Equity, and Mission, where you are the director.
You got it.
So, and we've
Mouthful.
got it. We have, you know, I want to say that I feel very proud of the social work perspective, and I think it has a lot to offer to give a sort of a holistic view, because it is person and environment. So it takes a lot of factors into account. And I think we're all so severely challenged with the COVID. So it was your idea, Rolanda, when we were talking about what we wanted to talk about. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because we're all struggling here. So why don't you say, you know, a little more about what you thought, your ideas on this topic, and then some of the things that the COVID is making us attend to. What made you think of
Yeah.
this?
So when we think about, right, when we think about what's going on right now, a lot of people think that COVID is a medical issue, but COVID actually has a lot of social and cognitive, mental health, economic, geographic outcomes that we need to be considering at the same time. And so I thought it would be really cool if we brought together 3 social workers tonight to have a conversation about some of the disparities that have emerged as a result of this medical crisis, global crisis, and that we can educate as well as share our perspective about some of the things that we need to be considering when we think about social justice in our communities and then across our nation.
Well, I think it's such a great subject, and you know, it's something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about. I think each of us individually, people, you can't help thinking about it, you know, and especially if you have a work, you know, if your position and your profession has that broader optic of looking at, you know, taking care of people, then we can't help noticing that all of the problems that we've been working on right along are just getting steadily worse in most cases, almost every case.
Right. Yeah, no, this conversation about COVID should begin with the fact that injustice was present, which has lent itself to some of the outcomes that we're seeing. Why is it that people of color are impacted by this infection at greater numbers? And it looks at the ecological perspective that we know so well, that considers the different systems that people have to engage on a given day. So if you have people who have no real source of transportation, who are bound by public health, by public transportation systems, they then are at a higher rate of infection because they're around other people as they travel about. There's no way for them to have less than 15 minutes of exposure to people outside of their bubbles, right? And,
Right.
you know, what if they have to take 2 and 3 buses? What if they have to go to jobs where they come across at least 100 people who cross their paths every day, and they have no choice but to go to work and can't stay home, right? I think
Right.
all 3 of us have had the privilege of remaining in our houses over the course of this pandemic. And it's sad to say that this pandemic wasn't treated as a universal problem, but it was treated as a just like insurance is in our country, right? It's job based, right? The better your job is, the better insurance you have. The better your job is, the less risk you have to COVID. So,
Right.
you know, I just think that this just it exasperated the injustice that we already were aware of, and it highlights that these problems are higher order problems and they're not at the individual level.
Right.
Dr. Ward, I also want to mention, like you mentioned about the public transportation, right? So I know here in Massachusetts, they're even talking about cutting back on the public transportation, right? Like the hours of the service, the number of services that they're offering. So once again, right, like the injustice, the inequality to those people who are using the public transportation, and now how does that impact their work schedule?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, it makes me think back to, you know, that it's exacerbating almost every one of our problems. So
Mhm.
in terms of healthcare also, in terms of essential workers. So the essential workers who have to go to work, and that's, as you said, so many of those jobs are the less well-paying jobs. So, you know, loading the grocery shelves, moving the things around, taking, you know, the nurses' aides, the healthcare workers. And as we go on up, you know,
Right.
the essential workers, which does include some professional people as well, but
Sure.
there's certainly plenty of them, plenty, including Lyft drivers and other people, who and what to speak of employees for public transportation. There's just area after area, and then there's so many people who have lost their jobs, who are the less skilled workers in most cases, or the service workers in most cases. So
And
I was just going to
eh,
go ahead.
no, no, and I was just going to say along those lines of people who have lost their jobs, and then there are the people who fear the loss of jobs
Sure,
and put themselves in harm's way.
sure.
So, you know, we did some outreach trying to get cab drivers tested for COVID,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't want that, right? And the reason why they didn't want it is because that would take them off the line and then would decrease the amount of income that they brought in that day.
They
And
need it.
so, right?
Those
Like,
days, right?
so,
Because they should be
right.
quarantining, right, for like up to 14 days. So that's
Exactly.
2 weeks of no
Exactly.
income.
Right.
Right.
Of no income, right? For individuals who have no sick time, right? Who, even though their laws were passed in New York to give you that sick time, but the reality is that you can't go without income because you're living day to day because your income is already insufficient. We aren't paying people living wages, so therefore people really are dependent on every hour of work that they can
Right.
gain
Right.
throughout this pandemic.
One of the other things that I also, of course, thinking of, how many of these people have rent? How many of these people are going to be homeless? So you know, there are some the statistics which actually, you know, well, one of them in terms of unemployment, I think it was 64 million people have filed for unemployment since March. And that is a 41% of the workforce. I mean, that is astronomical. 41%. Now, some of those people may be back to work by now, but some of them are not. And I want to say, I don't know about you in Massachusetts. Here in Western New York, we have it's COVID is on the rise. Things are
Oh
getting
yeah, we're in the
yeah.
red. Actually, Massachusetts, as of Sunday, is rolling back to phase 3, step 1. So it's reducing the number of hours, reducing the number of people in areas. So they're actually pulling back. And where I live down in southeastern Mass, we've been in the red zone pretty steadily, sadly. So yeah, no, numbers are
Right,
definitely on the
really.
rise.
Yeah, we're still orange, right? Well,
Yes,
yes, good.
we're still orange. I don't know
Yes,
why we're
Dr.
still
Ward.
orange.
Yeah, because they're
We're
trying to give us a break. I don't know, you know, I mean, you know,
I mean, our
bending the
numbers
rules a
haven't
little
been
bit.
good for weeks.
No,
Right?
right.
Right, you know, like
Yeah, we
you
get
know, I
weekly messages
Mhm.
from our mayor in the city that I live in.
Now, what's your
And
city again?
I live in New Bedford, in the New Bedford
That's right,
area.
New Bedford.
Yeah.
I've been in New Bedford.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's
so
a beautiful place.
they send out weekly, voicemail messages, just kind of letting us know, like, we were at 4%. Now we're up to like 5 point something percent, almost 6% positivity
Right,
rate.
right.
And so
We've
now
got you
we're seeing
beat.
those.
Whoa,
We've been at 7.
And you
right.
guys aren't in the red?
We aren't in the red. We aren't in the red. We're not in the red.
Well, even
So
that, right? Like, there hasn't been a national standard, and it's every community is kind of figuring it out on their own. I'm sure
Well,
that's a whole
don't
other
get me
topic.
started on the gangsta in the White House, who's still in the White House, thankfully on the way out, who's been bragging about the wonderful, wonderful response that they have not had, no matter what the claims, because it's just the same old hashtag lies, lies, lies. There's a lot of lies going on about that. It has been a very difficult, very difficult without the federal, the concerted, the cooperation and collaboration that is really needed has been stymied by the lack of leadership in offering PPE
Yeah.
and et cetera.
And if we could just take your word leadership and add a hashtag to it, leadership matters. And I think
Yes.
that we've seen that throughout this, right? That
Oh
if
boy.
there is no vision, then there
Mhm.
are no true outcomes. We're social workers and
Right.
we understand vision, mission, objectives, right?
Right.
Outcomes, right? We
Smart
Right.
goals.
understand that. Smart
Right.
goals.
Smart goals.
We
Yeah.
understand that. And if there is no vision from the very beginning, you'll never get your outcomes.
Right.
And I think that's what we have seen is that the lack of leadership had a lack of vision, which
Yeah.
led to a lack of outcomes, which means that we sucked at this pandemic.
So here's the vision I saw. I can't see you. La 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 la.
All right. Like if I don't
Oh,
see you, if I don't see you, if I don't experience it, then it must not be real.
right. And if I say
And
it's not
actually,
happening, yeah,
mhm.
go ahead.
And that's actually what Melissa just said is so critical because we also know as social workers that when something doesn't become um, a public issue unless it is seen,
Right.
right? So for when our lack of leadership
Mhm.
decided not to articulate this and not to describe it as a health crisis, a pandemic, a global one,
Right.
then that meant that there was never going to be a strategy tied to it. There was
Mhm.
never going to be a public health issue that required extensive resources. It just wasn't going to happen. So, I mean, that's the very basic concept of how does something move from an individual problem to a public problem? Is that it has to be seen.
Right.
Mhm.
And acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
And acknowledged. And
Mm-hmm.
and and then I mean, we've had so much misinformation that I think has really fed this so much. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that
And don't
people
you
are
think that the
encouraged.
the misinformation is also tied to when we talk about privilege and oppression, that the misinformation was tied to privilege, and privilege begets power, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And that was driving certain outcomes for the privilege. I mean, I'm gonna say it, right?
Yeah.
I said it in the very beginning. We were
Sure.
privileged to be at home, and
Oh,
can I
sure.
tell you? And I'm not trying to
Mhm.
brag or because I
Right,
can't
right.
do anything about it because I can't touch it until I retire. But why did my 401k? Why is my 401k up? Like, you know what I
Well,
mean? Like,
this is
why? How am I benefiting when we're in a pandemic? I can't benefit it from right now. I can't take it out. But I literally looked the other day and I was like, huh? Right? Like, how is it that I made this amount of return during a global crisis?
Yeah.
and here's what I wanna answer actually as a first of all, it was your idea for me to talk more about the economics, and I did study economics, but I wanna
Mm-hmm.
say it's not even so much well, it's a sort of political economics of, the predatory capitalism in this, you know, uh, government of, by, and for the corporations. So the
Mm-hmm.
corporations, so capital breeding, profits, right? As they are wont to do. And people are still buying things or needing things. And the people who
Mm-hmm.
have money are still buying things and needing things. And the people who don't have money are still buying things until they run out of money, right? So
Mm-hmm.
those people are spending money, and then there's a certain amount of profit. And with our lack of using the tax structure to allocate resources more equitably than capitalism normally does. That's one of the purposes of the tax system. And it
Mm-hmm.
used to be that people were that corporations or the wealthier were taxed at up to 90%.
Mm-hmm.
up until up until things started to really go downhill from Reagan on. And Clinton was part of that, and they've all been part of that. And I mean, Clinton particularly, but certainly from in the 90s and then all through the 2000s, more and more the tax rate has flattened so that as profits are generated and given to stockholders and upper management, and things have taken off where, you know, the CEOs are making 300 times what the workers are making. 300 times. It's crazy. And Jeff Bezos has had an astronomical increase in his.
I read a
in
book that was
billions.
published in 2018. And at that time they had him at like, I don't know, I think it was like 75 million or 75 billion. I don't know, million, billion. I don't know the difference.
Billion.
Billion, right?
Billions,
We'll never
yes.
know the difference. But
No, I have some trouble with that.
You know, so then I'm reading this book and I'm like, I don't know about any of my other friends or colleagues. I was like, but I know my income hasn't doubled in the past 2 years. So he had gone
my
from like
God.
75 to like 100. Now he's like, what, almost 200 billion or close, whatever. I mean, those numbers are just, they don't even mean anything, right, to us.
And they, you know what? And this is the sad part. They don't really mean anything to him. He can't do anything with, I mean, is his life, how many billions, how many billions does it have to be for him to really enjoy life, right? You know, no, I mean, once you've passed a certain number of millions, it's totally irrelevant. It's really, in terms of lifestyle choices, you know, I mean, things can only be so expensive, a lot of them. So it's just a craziness. And I want to say, I want to say proudly, I have not ordered a single damn thing on Amazon, and nor am I going to. You know,
Well, I
I mean,
can't.
that is,
I'm sorry, Vicky. Don't hurt me. I contributed to the income.
no, well, people need it.
I'm sorry.
People need it. People need to be safe. You know, people need to be safe. I'm
But I think you brought up a good
shopophobic, so
point,
that helps.
Rolanda, when you mentioned the stock market, right? Like the stock market is not the economy. You know, they keep talking about like, oh, the stocks are up, but people, you know, the food lines are, you know, wrapping
Right.
around parking lots and
Right.
miles long, you know, so it's like, it's such a
Right.
huge disconnect. Like just talk about like cognitive
Right.
dissonance, like just,
Right.
we're talking about
I
like
think
this.
there's. No, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, Melissa. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say how there's this like, you know, this great stock market and yet the economy and like the everyday person is just not experiencing that. The everyday person,
Not at
you know, the
all.
frontline worker doesn't have stocks, doesn't have an IRA, doesn't have a 401k. So
Right.
that means nothing to them.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And when we think about the differences, I had a conversation this week that acknowledged the differences for people who have insurance, who have disposable income, and even the testing um, opportunities that people have, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
we've struggled to have community-based testing that is free, that is available, that gives you your results back in within 3 days was, like the gold standard at one point, but then it reached 14 days. You didn't even get your results back. And then
That's what
on the
happened to
news
me.
this week,
Mm.
yeah, that's what happened. On the news this week, I heard about a private company that is now offering here in Buffalo, is
Mhm.
now offering testing that comes to your home and you just pay $200 for it. I was like, we continuously drive our decisions about this pandemic based upon your ability to pay, right? Your ability to have economic disposable income. I like that to me is just where's the ethical considerations? Where are the ethicists? Where in our policies? That's the part that just drives me absolutely livid when we're talking about the disparities that exist based upon social economic classes.
I want to mention two things that are really just zinging in my head from what you said. And one is shout out to Reverend George Nicholas and the I think they call it the African American Health Disparities project. So anyway, he's had numerous excellent events about it, and publicized it very well here in Buffalo. Just how radically different, and there's all kinds of statistics that back that up. It's not unique to Buffalo. It is very generally true that 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 racially and economically, healthcare is vastly different in this country. And the other thing I wanted to mention is Richard Wicca, actually shout out to Richard Wicca, our producer, who's somewhere here. I don't know if he can hear me, but he was mentioning to me before we started, he said, "Did you hear about India today?" No, I didn't hear. So India, where we know first of all, they have, as we say, like our massive problems are being exacerbated, their massive problems, and they have huge poverty, are being exacerbated. And so they're looking for the vaccine as well. And they talked to the Pfizer, I think it was, or one of the companies that's making a vaccine, and said, "Oh, gee, we'd love to be getting it because the UK is getting it." And they said, "Well, they're already, it's a list." They said, "Well, put us on the list to get it." Because they said, "Well, you can't get it until like 2019 when you're on this list." And so then, and then they said, "Well, just sell us the formula, and then we'll make it." And they said, "Oh no, we can't sell you the formula because that wouldn't be fair to our stockholders." So he said, "Well, he said, and then somewhere somebody along the line, and I think to their credit, it might have been the company, said, take it to the UN and see if they can do something about it, so that to force the issue, because it's unconscionable that the profit making around the COVID, around this disaster. It's talk about predatory capitalism. It is outrageous.
That's right. That's right. And how are we thinking about the project director for the Ostapenko Center and I are putting out a piece, an op-ed, and what we're actually having conversation about is this idea of what is fairness when you also integrate the concept of racial equity. And so, the levels that they're talking about is just start with seniors, or start with first responders, then start with seniors, then start with those who are vulnerable, and then the healthy. And as a person who is deeply embedded into conversations around what is racial equity would ask us to look at where the disparities are, and then to start our interventions from there. So if the pandemic has shown us that there is a disparity along racial and economic lines.
Absolutely.
Why is it that we are starting with the privileged first? We've defined folks as vulnerable who sit in these privileged categories. But what about the fact that we're talking about people who are dying at higher numbers? Why not start with them?
But which privilege category? So older people? Is that what you mean?
So I listen, I got an older grandmother, and I don't know if she's gonna take this vaccine myself. But when I'm thinking about
yes, we love Granny.
We love Granny.
Yes.
But
serenader. Anyway.
If we take the categories that are being listed, right? If we take the categories and if we cut them by racial categorization, I guarantee you that the racial categories that are at the most risk within this pandemic are going to be at the bottom. They're not going to benefit from the vaccination early on, because we've created these phases of integration for the vaccination. And so that's the part that I just really want a lot of people to have. And I know that that's a tough one, because when you're talking about life or death, it becomes, are you going to advocate for the people who are without? or are you going to advocate for yourself? And that's a hard one. And that's an ethical one. That's a moral one, right? It may even be theological.
Well,
And I'm just trying to push the question, if people are dying at disproportionate rates, why
right.
not target this intervention by race in order to help that disproportionality?
See, I don't think it's a hard one. No, let me put it another way. I think that I recognize that usually, often it will be a hard one. But I think it needs to not be a hard one because we have to look at the probabilities and where the suffering. And I'm trying to remember what Cornell West said about allowing suffering to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of the things is it doesn't get heard. It's sort of,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if it's so much about this or I can't hear you or whatever, but that's when suffering doesn't, it's not that the suffering isn't speaking, it's that people are not listening. So people are dying in the
Mm-hmm.
inner city. People are dying where they have to live in close proximity. Refugees, immigrants, especially Black people, especially very lower income people.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people who
Mm-hmm.
are suffering and
Mm-hmm.
dying. And
Well,
especially
remember,
like older Black people, would it not
mm-hmm.
be? I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sure the numbers will bear that out.
yeah. Because I think when we talk about what is social welfare, right?
Hmm.
When we talk about the social welfare system, the one thing that we know is that the United States has a pull yourself up by your own bootstrap, right? Perspective. And that means that you are sick, you are dying because of something you did, right? You're overweight because you eat too much, right? You have three generations living in one household because you don't work enough, right? And so therefore I don't see you because I'm not valuing who you are.
Because I'm
So
ignoring the things I don't want to know.
well, I'm not going to see the suffering because I don't see it as suffering. I see it as this is what you get.
This is a consequence of your choice, your
That's
action.
right.
But of
And I
course it
see it,
isn't. It's
and
a
I see it like
consequence of rest.
I've always really disliked the pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right? Because that makes the assumption that everyone has bootstraps, that everyone has boots, that everyone has feet to wear the
Mm-hmm.
boots. And not
Mm-hmm.
everyone does. Like we know that not everyone starts off at that same playing level field,
Right,
you know?
right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
So I've always pushed back on that comment
Mm-hmm.
because it's not reality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and people's situations are so much affected by the history, which is why we cannot say, oh, it's all over now. It's not important to recognize. No, it's vital to recognize because it explains where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Why, yes, that there are some people of color who've gone into the upper echelon and of the socioeconomic or whatever. But in general, there's a reason why people of color don't have the resources, don't have the home values because of the policies that were followed, because of the history of what happened, because of all the systemic racism in the system. I mean, so those things help they need to be attended to, or people otherwise they can get away with this myth of it's the reality from your choices when really it's the reality of the lived history and the consequences of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in Niagara County, um, we have state testing,
Hmm.
and state testing is all the way out in the boonies, right?
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Hmm.
I understand that we're trying to put one site, we're trying to, be very careful with the resources, but you put it in a place where urban people can't get to it, right? Like and it's like, who made that decision? And
Right.
why didn't you see it through a disparity lens? If you put it in a place where people have to drive, but you have a city where the majority of people don't have transportation to get 15 miles away. That's a problem, right? And that's the structural, those are the examples of structural changes that we have to consider if we ever want to get this vaccination protocol procedure right.
Mm,
It's not
right,
going to work if we don't have this kind of perspective. And the calls for justice, the calls for racial justice and equity, right? We're never going to change that if we continuously engage in practices that lead us down the same exact path.
right,
Yeah, that's why we need diverse work teams, right? Because that leads to more effective problem solving.
right, right. We absolutely do. And that's one thing that we try very hard. And I think as social workers, that's one thing that I think we have had really, what can I say, integrated into our very being. I know it's very much in my mind at the Western New York Peace Center, and that's something that we've accomplished over the past years is to build more diversity into the Western New York Peace Center and into at our problem solving, our approach to any campaign. I think that's really critical. And diversity in all kinds of ways, in age, definitely in race and in ethnicity as well, and age and all kinds of other things. It's gender and gender preference and or sexual preference and so many and abilities, different abilities. So I think it's
And there's
important.
also in that comp too that you're describing right now for social workers, there's also the idea of difference. And so for
Right,
us, we look at where is marginalization? Where is oppression, right? Where is privilege and power? Where's anti-racism? Those are things that we consider on a regular basis. Every
right,
single day,
right.
right? We are looking at the work that we're trying to accomplish through those lenses. And
Mhm.
that's the only way that we're going to get to equitable distribution of resources, social, economic, right, political resources.
Right,
That's the only way we're going to get there when we try to critique our everyday activities through a diversity and a difference lens.
right. I want to shift just a little bit over to children and youth. And I see drawings behind you, I think. Do I, Melissa?
Oh, those are books.
Oh, books. Oh, books. No,
That's
I even with my reading glasses, what can I tell? Okay, books, books, books. But
yeah,
anyway, so in any case, I mean, I know you're working with children and youth. And so and I know that here in Buffalo, people are very troubled about the bad effects on children in the vital years because of course none of this time will be re-given to us.
yeah, yeah. So I work with children, youth, and families for the Department of
Mm,
Mental Health, and
mhm,
so we're dealing with a very high acuity persons. And mental health refers to our well-being and includes how we feel emotionally, psychologically, and in relationship with other people, right? So now
mhm,
all of a sudden, we no longer are having those relationships with other people. We're now feeling like isolated. So the number of cases that we're starting to see and get in our area is definitely increased. Kids are getting, are much more likely to be evaluated in the hospital for psychiatric and mental health conditions, because they're starting, they're feeling that isolation.
right,
Um, and just as we all are, like as adults, right? Like
right,
we're social beings, especially social workers.
right,
Like we want to be out with people and interacting with people, and kids, I can't even imagine what that's like for an 8-year-old or for a parent who has to, who has the
right,
privilege to work from home while their kid is taking online classes. And so we are definitely seeing a lot more depression, anxiety. What's going to happen? Are we pulling back more? Are the kids, and so even when we have been able to do some in-person work with the kiddos, you can see they're so relieved, like they're so excited to be around other peers.
sure,
um, but and then but right now, because I was mentioning earlier, like the numbers are going up, so things are starting to get pulled back, so there's a lot of more anxiety kind of coming out regarding are we going to have to go back into lockdown, and what is that going to be like? And so yeah, no, the mental health is definitely, you know, as it has affected all of us, especially I think about our youth and our young ones and the families, and they're just trying to hold it together like we all are. And then you add the economics onto it and the social
Right.
justice and the unrest that's been going on around the country and racial trauma, and you just add all of that. We're really at a pivotal point in our society.
And the COVID
And
is, go ahead.
no, I
Go
was
ahead,
just
Ro.
gonna say, like, you know, when we think about young people, Melissa, right? Like, what are some of the strategies that you can offer, parents right now? Because parents are educators,
Right.
and how do you help them navigate this with their young people?
Yeah, so we're offering them like parent support groups, right? Where they, because it can,
Hmm.
even for the parents, they can feel
Right.
very isolated, and so
Hmm.
being around other parents, you know, even in a virtual world, to try to
Right.
get support from one another. Um, you know, helping them to develop some of their own skills, whether it's their coping skills, their social skills, so that way kids learn best through their role models.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we do have some services that are going into the homes. Um, I shouldn't say necessarily like in the homes, but they're going, you know, meeting outside. That we've tried to do a lot of like outside activities, meeting at a
Right.
park, going for a
Hmm.
walk,
Hmm.
trying to institute as much of the, you know, the social distancing, the mask wearing, all of that stuff. So it's, and just, I think being present with the parents, being present with the families, like, I hear you. You know, people
Right.
want to feel validated in their emotions, uh,
Right.
know that they're not alone. We have a number of websites and that we can refer families to kind of check out some videos, some other tips and tricks to handling this. Because there was no book for this, right? Like, there was no book
What are
like,
the implications?
what do you mean?
What are the implications of young people not having their mental health treated for this period of time? Because it's young people who already have mental health issues, who may have been getting services school based, who
Yep.
are not currently not getting them. And then the implications of young people having this level of, this is weighty stuff, right?
Oh, God, yes. Mm.
Not just the isolation that young people are experiencing, but just the concept of death in the hundreds of thousands. And like one of the statistics that we've been sharing for young people is that young people of color are more likely, they're less likely to be receiving mental health services
Mm-hmm.
and in community. And therefore, the school-based services are so very critical to their development. So
Right.
I just want us to have a conversation about what are the implications of young people not having their mental health needs met during, we're almost a year into this.
Yeah.
What's the potential outcome for young people?
Yeah, I guess time will tell on that one. But even thought about, you know, when you mentioned, when we think about the economics and the effects on the mental health, right? Like, some of our kids didn't even have access to a laptop or an iPad or some kind of technology to access the virtual world. And then to try to get the internet, a lot of our more impoverished families don't have access to internet. That's an additional expense that they just haven't had.
Right.
Um, so just like how it continues to exasperate, and to
Mhm.
really, those disparities are just widening on so many different levels. And then when you think about racial trauma,
Mm.
during this whole time, I've been attending a number of trainings on, as a clinical social worker, um, I wasn't really ever trained to ask a racial trauma question. I think that's a
Mhm.
huge disservice that we do. We don't ask, we talk about, have you experienced trauma? And when we talk about trauma, we often think about like sexual assault or domestic violence or physical abuse. But we don't talk about the racial trauma and those micro, I'm even hesitant to use the word microaggressions, but we don't even we don't even talk about that. And the number of microaggressions that the average person of color experiences on a daily basis And that just continues to manifest over a period of time. And so, you know, really developing language around that. How do we ask those questions? Because how are our families being impacted by not only the COVID, but then all of the things that our young kids of color are seeing on TV? You know, another man killed by police, you know, just this week, you know, so they're seeing this constantly. And so what are those impacts and those effects going to be like in the future? We have job security, but we definitely need to do a better job, even I think within social work and training up our social workers to be able to have those honest dialogue and those questions about racial trauma. And what is that like for somebody?
Although I think there has been a lot of improvement in that area. And I'm going to say, well, first, when people talk about post-traumatic slave disorder and or shame, because I think when some of the work about trauma, it started with the veterans, et cetera, and then it got into you know, as it became post-traumatic stress disorder, when, you know, went from shell shock to post-traumatic stress disorder, to it was in the addictions counseling where they discovered shame as being a big the subtle trauma. That's what I like to call it. Shame is the subtle trauma. Well, when we say we live in a shame-based society, and that subtle trauma is pretty damn pervasive, and especially racially oriented. So when we talk about the microaggressions and the racism, I mean, and what to speak of direct racism, that is so traumatic, and that is perpetuated, you know, in such a way that it can't help be a huge impact on people, just a huge thing to deal with, you know, and extremely traumatic. Um, uh, and Ro, do you think?
I think so. And I think, right, the disparities that we're seeing during this pandemic, let's think about this. If your family went from, I know that my young people, like my income is limited, and I know that my young people are going to get 2 meals a day by going to school. And now, because of COVID, kids are out of school. So now we have kids who are experiencing the shame of not being able to have food on the table, or we have the shame of having to go and to ask for a box or a bag of food, right? Like, just think about the implications of that on our young people's health and development. And I mean, because we're not giving people the economic resources that they need to sustain themselves throughout this pandemic, right? We're not giving people housing security. We have people who are, you know, moving from place to place if they can, so that they can shelter up with somebody else, or trying to dodge the landlord because they don't have the money to pay the landlord, right? Like, and so how does all of that impact young people?
So many people are facing eviction. That's also true. But so I, you know, I feel like, you know, I've been thinking during a lot of this conversation about, you know, in a little bit of a religious framework or interfaith framework. You know Tom Casey, do you, Rolanda? You might have met him. Anyway, he's with the Pax Christi, Western New York. Anyway, and works with the interfaith peace network that I work with sometimes. And he wrote an article on behalf of the Interfaith Peace Network that was basically about how all of our different faith communities, in different ways, it's always about taking care of the least of these. It's always about, you know, about caring for each other, caring for people and the planet, people and the creation. And so all of our faith our scriptures or traditions do all point us in that direction. And in this COVID, in every way, all of those different, especially in this place and time. So there's been the gangsta in the White House and the awakening of the realization for people who have not had it of the and even for those who have had it, just such just uh, incredible driving home of the heinousness of police brutality against Black people and the criminalization of Black people that is so pervasive, that so all of that with racial justice that has just zoomed to the surface. So all of those things are going on along with the COVID, along with this economic catastrophe, all at the same time. And I feel like those are the things that can draw us together. And yet we have the COVID that's making people separate. So I think, we've had, even on this show, when we've had this technological challenge to get the show together on Zoom with different equipment than usual and all kinds of other things, that some of the technology and some of the creativity can help us maybe there are some ways that this can help people to understand just how much our militarism and predatory capitalism and nationalism, and what else? Racism, all those things have to be disbanded, barred, ended, because our only way of surviving and our only way forward is together, taking care of each other.
Community.
Yeah, I want to, I sometimes I have a problem with hope, Vicky.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, I'm
sometimes
sorry.
I
Yeah,
do. I
right.
do. And the reason why I do is because the reality is that the togetherness hasn't existed in this country. Like,
Mm-hmm,
we've never experienced that level of understanding of otherness
mm-hmm,
in our historical being, right? And so
mm-hmm.
how are we ever going to get to togetherness when we started with the fact that, genocide was the way to conquer,
Right, right,
to establish one's sense of ownership of others. So that's my problem, is that, like, I want to fight for justice, and I will always fight for justice, but I also am, I am cautious about the idea that transformation will happen in very radical ways, because it will require, right? It will require people to think of themselves less, right?
right.
It will. I'm reading a book by Tom Keller,
Mm-hmm,
Generous Justice,
mm-hmm,
and it challenged me to think about, am I, when I donate, right, when I
mm-hmm,
give to charity, right,
mm-hmm,
when i
mm-hmm.
when i when i donate stuff, am I consciously living in the suffering of somebody else, or am I being dismissive of their true needs, and I'm satisfying my own ego to give, right? And I think that's the, until we do that level of self-examination of what our own truth story is, I don't know how we're ever going to get to the concept of togetherness. Sorry to be the downer, but
No, right. No, we need to be realistic. I actually, Cornell West also said some things about hope. It was not a friend of hope, or that hope is more of an act, is an act. That it is for us to act in such a way that gives us hope that we
Mhm,
can change, and that
mhm,
self-examined, speaking, we were just going through things with interns, right? This is, mid semester for internships. Um, and that and for all of us, and I think that's one thing that, the self-examined life is not worth living, that we
mhm,
need to be examining ourselves all the time. And and
Isn't that
You
what
know,
we do
there's-
as social workers
Yes,
all
it
the
is.
time?
All the time, all the time.
Too
Sometimes I wish
much.
I could live in this like ignorant bliss of like just la la la. I'm just gonna do
Nah.
Right? No, it's not an option. Right?
and it's not. It's like, why did I think that? What should I do? How could I go about? Like we over process and analyze.
Right, right, right.
And all
right.
of our friends are social workers, right? So that's all we do when we talk with each other.
Ooh.
Mm.
But I do think that that's where the progress comes, because it is lifelong learning, and it is just trying to keeping, to keep on learning and to keep on improving and finding a better way, and and even then, re-examining it and doing better. Just and or even I don't listen to Cornell West too much. No, I do. I listen to Cornell West all the time, and I want to say another one he quotes is, this isn't him, I'm trying to remember who said it. Fail, fail and fail better, to fail
Mhm.
better. You heard him say that.
Mhm.
What was your
Mhm.
question to him again when we did it? We're gonna have that
Oh
transcript
gosh.
soon. We're gonna have that. Oh,
Oh.
I know what it was. It was about all the people who voted for Trump.
Oh
Yes, it
yeah,
was.
that's right. That's
That was
right.
it. Yeah, we're
That's
gonna
right.
have that transcript pretty soon. And also we're gonna be ending this pretty soon. So in the
Mhm.
next couple minutes, we have a couple more minutes. So what are anything that, first of all, I'd say, anything that people have forgotten to say, points that you might have wanted to make about this issue, and also, and really especially to sort of bottom line of what we need to remember to grapple with this.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think for me, as
Okay.
far as thinking about like our youth, children, families,
Mm-hmm.
that during COVID, that some of our kiddos might be showing signs of stress that they haven't seen before. And
Mm-hmm.
so for
Mhm.
parents, families, any kind of provider who is, witnessing any kind of kiddo, to just be on the lookout for any kind of like moody, easily upset, irritability,
Mhm.
any kind of extreme sadness, any, if they're feeling extremely worried or fearful, not following the rules, something that's like out of character for the kiddo, sleeping too much or not enough, as well as complaints of the stomach or the headaches. It starts to become somatic for some of our kids, and so being aware of that, as well as like any other behaviors that are new or that have you worried as a parent, a caregiver, a guardian, teacher, whatever it is of the kids that you're working with or treating or living with.
Mhm.
Just being aware of those signs, and if so, contacting your local community service agencies wherever you're at, or going on, I know here in Massachusetts we have handheldma.org.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Children's Behavioral Knowledge Center. I even looked up, even in preparing for this, I looked up like just the CDC. They have a whole section on parents and what to look for. And they have, if your
Right.
kiddo is like 0 to 5, 6 to 12, 13 to 18, and then like
Mm-hmm.
the young adults, 18 to 24.
Mm-hmm.
So just knowing that there are resources out there, to check in with your kid's pediatrician, their doctor, try to get them some kind of services, just being aware of what, things that are just different.
Right. Right. So that's a good reminder, and some good resources for parents, and certainly makes me think of the other thing that social workers, when we talk about self-care, and the old take care of your needs first so you're better able to assist. So if we're not like completely frazzled and stressed out, or uh, and not too depressed, because otherwise the children will, that's
Mhm.
something yeah. Yeah, but so those resources are great. And what do Dr. Ward,
You know,
what do you
I'm
think?
gonna go on the other end. So
Mm,
Melissa started us off with the micro, and I'm gonna push us to the macro.
right. I
And
know you would.
I'm gonna ask,
You would.
yeah, I'm
Great
gonna ask us
macros,
to
the
really,
macro.
we need to engage government
Yes.
significantly,
Yes. Mm,
as we make our way through the rest of this pandemic.
mm,
We need to ask our representatives to work on behalf of everyone.
right.
We need to ask them for, at the federal level, we need to get legislation passed that provides economic security for individuals who, at no fault of their own, have been without work, without health care,
Right.
without food, without housing, we have to ask that. At the local level, as states implement their vaccination plans, we need to ask questions about how that vaccination will be distributed and how will we ensure that people will be educated about why this vaccination may be helpful to them. Are we doing adequate outreach to reach people who are typically underserved? And we know what the medically underserved communities are. We know where they are. We know where those individuals live.
Right.
And are we going to do the work to actually reach out to them and to educate them, and it not be a simple, because many people, I'm going to tell you, people of color are absolutely weary of this vaccination, and they're
Oh, sure.
weary for just cause, right?
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
historically, we have
Yes.
not been treated well when it comes to these mass medical interventions.
Right.
So what are we doing to make sure that people understand the validity or the efficacy of this vaccination or the alternative vaccinations that will be available by the time the masses actually are vaccinated? So I think we have to engage our political system and our government representation in a way so that we can make sure that everyone, I want to say everyone fares well, but what I want to make sure is that everyone has choices as we make our way through the end of this pandemic.
Right. Right. Thank you so much. And that everyone's needs are met. They need to be met. And the neediest, the neediest people need their needs met the most. And which reminds me, so I was just talking about the self-care. So, and I love the clinical or micro and the macro. But, and so the other thing is, it's making me think back to the opposite of the self-care is also that deep generosity that we must have to care in truth and love, to really, love our community, our neighbors, our not our neighbors, our people, everyone, that everyone's needs are met, that I don't like that phrase, the least of these, that's always bothered me, but it's the people with the greatest needs. Those needs are the first ones that need to be met. And we need to make that happen. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, and together we've been talking peace. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. In truth and love. We'll be signing off. Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. And bye for now. This has been Talking Peace in Truth and Love. Ooh. Hi. Oh, wait a minute. Let me try. I'm trying to turn up my, oops. No, that's not what I want to do. Anyway, so we're a little bit late because we had some technological issues, which means there was my fault that I was confused about the schedule. And so anyway, so it took us a little longer to get things rolling in the first hour than we thought it would. So we finished it. And now I still need Richard to come back and do whatever he does to get us started. But I just wanted to alert you that was why. So it might be now, if he comes right up, maybe it'll be in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't know. Is that good, still good for you? Oops. Hi. So we had a little bit of confusion. So I was mixed up on when Richard had scheduled me for, or us for. So it ended up taking us longer to get everything together because we had to do all kinds of turning into pretzels to figure out how to do it in this other studio. So we still did it. We've done it. It's done. So I haven't seen Richard yet, but I can go down and find him. But it might be like five. I don't know how long it takes him, and I know it's going to be audio only. So that's actually good because that's one of the reasons it was harder to do this on Zoom and the Facebook and all that jazz. But we figured it out anyway. So so I'll go here. Maybe I'll just go down and find him and ask him. There. So he'll give us a prediction or something. Thinking, I don't know how much he hears or what. You know, I never really understand what's happening on the production level. And I don't even know how to turn the volume back up on my phone. Yeah, it's not coming back up. So weird. Oh, I know what I need. I'm just that dumb. It was it was difficult. I want to say it was very technologically challenging. I didn't know if we figured it out.
Just type it in here.
Okay,
Okay, all you have to do is type in his phone number.
sure. Well, thank you. So I'm amazed that we figured all that out.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I'm impressed at your computer skills.
Oh, I am too. Because I'm not, you heard me. I'm not a techie and I'm not anything, but it just somehow we were able to figure it out.
That's
So,
great. So you
okay.
can either use this keypad or you
Yeah.
can use the numbers there. And then we have to make sure he can hear you.
Yeah. I couldn't remember how to turn the sound back up on my phone. That's how dumb I am. Oops. Oh, Facebook is still live. So, oh, so I have to disconnect here.
I already closed it.
Oh, you did. So if you already closed it, it should be disconnected. Wait, let me just
You can
ask
go
her.
back to it.
me
Maybe
just
it,
ask
maybe
her.
it stays hot unless you
just ask her.
specifically see you're closing it.
I don't know how to do it. Here, wait. Is shoot.
Did you figure out a way to tell Zoom to put it on Facebook?
Yes,
You are amazing.
thank you. Here, is it off? Is it off now?
Hold on 1 second, let me check. No, it's still live.
Oh.
It's just a blank screen,
Oh,
but the counter is still going.
okay, so let me
Log
see.
into Facebook and shut it off.
Log into Facebook here, or
Yeah.
maybe, should I
Whatever's
do it?
easier.
Maybe I can do it from, let me
Well,
see.
where did you
Okay.
activate it from,
Here.
there or there?
I activated it from here,
Do
the
it from there.
Facebook.
Do it from the
Oh,
same
but I
one.
activated it from the Zoom. So do I have to go, I've activated it
Melissa,
on,
I just have Vicky on. She's trying to
I'm-
disconnect.
yeah, it's, okay, wait, so if I go back to Zoom? No,
I would go to Facebook and see if you can do it that way.
okay. Okay, so I'll go to Facebook. Yeah, okay, oops, no. Okay, I know what I'm gonna do. Okay, we'll try this. So I'm just keeping you on the phone so you can tell me if it's off.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you both, and I also blew it on the timing so that when that buzzer goes off, then I know I screwed up. But
Oh, it made it to the buzzer?
yeah, okay, wait a minute. Let's see. So, why is it? Okay. Overview, no. See, I'm looking at Facebook and okay, it's taking a while to load, that's all. Okay, now let's find it and then I'll just shut it off. Okay, there it is. It's still live, right? And it's still got us all there. So how do I, okay, okay, now I'm gonna say, I don't know how to close it. I think it has to be, how do I turn it off? Richard, what do you think?
I would do it on the same computer that you did it.
But I'm on it has
I thought you said you did it on that computer there.
Okay, so if I hit live and if I comments are off. No, that's not it. No. Okay, I'm gonna have to go back into the Zoom account. How do I go? Okay, Zoom. Go to. Okay. Okay, now, okay, log in, where's the login? I am the worst person for doing this.
Listen, I have never done it, so you're much better than I am.
Oh, sign in, there it is, that's what I was looking for. Okay, we'll get there now. Okay, it's, wait. And, oops. And the worst part is fight, flight, freeze, upper brain shuts down.
Do you still need us?
I just want to make sure that it's off. So that's why I do still need you if I can. So
Okay.
it just went in, and then I'm gonna say,
Let's see. How to end, let's Google. How to end Facebook Live video live stream. How to end Facebook live stream.
it's gotta be the Zoom.
Go
It's gotta
live
be,
and end
no, I'm
live.
gonna have to end meeting. I think I figured it out.
You got it?
It has to be
Okay.
end meeting. So I think I can let you go. I'll just tell you, you both did a great job. I can't tell you how much I appreciated you. And, yeah.
No, we're good. I'll, if it's still on in 15 minutes, I'll call you.
Okay, no, it'll be off because I think that's got to be the way to do it. I think I figured it out. So thank you both so much.
Yeah,
Give
no,
her a
it's
big
so
hug.
on.
You're both so good. Okay,
Okay.
big hugs and love. Bye for now.
It's still live.
Oops. Wait a minute. No, I'm getting there. Wait, where is it? There it is. There it is. Talking Peace. End. This is going to be the end. There. Now wait. And end.